Hi, I'm Justin Mormon.
And I'm Katie Thornton, and this is the Re-Education of Schools podcast,
where we have open, honest conversations about how to better understand social-emotional learning, trauma-informed care, the whys behind student behavior, and how to help kids navigate it all as they go through school and life. All right, welcome back to our next episode, the Chaos Continuum. Before we get started, we really appreciate everybody who's listening. We appreciate that you share this with people. We would also really appreciate if you would give us a review, preferably 5 stars, on whatever platform you listen to the podcast on. It just helps people find this content and helps us keep the conversation going. I feel like I'm doing that more commercial-like every time we do it.
Yeah, it's really getting
really
better.
Finding that maybe my career should be there.
Spot's happening.
All right, so let's jump into real stuff. The Chaos Continuum. This came actually out of a conversation that I had with somebody who's doing similar work, and just through the course of conversation, they talked about feeling chaotic and what percentage of the time it felt chaotic, and it got me thinking kind of about this. So we know that when we're supporting a student or a group of students who maybe have big behavior or are kind of have a lot of bigger needs, it can feel at times chaotic, especially if there's not like good plans in place yet, or maybe you get a new student and nobody really knows each other yet, or whatever it might be. But if we look at it from the lens of like a continuum of how chaotic it feels, and our goal can be then to move students forward instead of just kind of living within that feeling of chaos. Not saying it always is chaos, but kind of that feeling of it. And so that's kind of where like the idea of this episode came from.
Yeah, and I think we see this a lot with people trying to start programs, behavior programs, or young new teachers in general. I mean, to start your first few years of teaching feel a little chaotic because you just are learning the art of teaching and what to do and all the pressures and the multitasking that's going on. So I think this is a good one to talk through.
Yeah.
So if it's okay, I'm going to start.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm going to start because I'm actually going to interview you.
Yeah. All right.
I have some things to contribute, but okay.
I'm sure you do.
Let's talk about a little bit about the continuum and what each one of these feel like. So if we were in complete chaos, what would that feel like, and how are we defining that?
Yeah. Okay. So complete chaos would be like real, like end of times, right? Armageddon-ish feeling, like there's fighting, there's cursing, throwing things, students leaving the room or the building, things being broken, people getting hurt, cats and dogs living together. Oh, total chaos.
Yeah.
You like that one? Yeah. I'm getting Josh on that one. He knew where I was coming from with that. It was a good one. So just completely chaotic, right? Yeah. Completely out of control, out of hand. What that feels like is it's going to feel like it's chaotic. I mean, it feels overwhelming. Feels like as a teacher or as one of the adults who's supposed to be in charge, I think it feels like you're failing. It feels like everyone is looking at you and also judging you. Even if it's people who aren't really actually witnessing any of it. So even think like parents, you're feeling like central office knows about it. You feel like, right, like all of this feels like everybody is all eyes are on you because it's chaotic.
It's everyone's business now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it feels like students ultimately are in control of the situation or of what's happening or dictating how the day goes overall. I think what it feels like for students. And it's been so long since we wrote these notes. Do you have it broken down this way as well? Is this how it's broken down?
No, I have a different thing, so keep going.
All right, so I'll keep going because I was like, well, maybe it makes sense for us to talk each group at the same time. We won't. We'll go this way. If you've ever thought that Katie and I are prepping together on these, we are not. All right, so what it feels like for a student then, I think it feels unsafe and like somebody needs to be in control, whether these are conscious thoughts or not. Like the students are absolutely going to feel like somebody needs to be in control, and there's like kind of a vacuum of any kind of authority or any kind of safe presence. And if it's not an adult that's going to fill that, then a student will. And that's not great because it's not like they're holding a vote on which student's going to be the one in control or try to restore order in some way. And so now all of a sudden you've got various students trying to do things in various ways to try to make it feel safe and feel regulated again. And if there's one thing that we know from listening, hopefully to 60 plus previous episodes, is that students and younger people aren't great at regulating themselves, self-regulation. So they're trying to figure it out, and it's a little bit too much. So when an adult is not in control, students in control, that can look like, intimidation of others, threatening. Again, it can get physically dangerous pretty quick. And so I think that's where that lands. What it means for everybody involved, whether it's students or adults, is that we're living in the lower part of our brain. We talk about that a lot. That's not new news if you've been around and been listening or have studied any number or listened to any number of other people talk about brain science. So we're all living in like the lower parts of our brain, but that means like the adults too. If it's feeling chaotic and you're consistently living in chaos, then not only are the students living in that part of their brain, but so are the adults. So one of the many things that means is that nobody's thinking long term.
And that's exactly what I was putting at the state-dependent functioning.
Yeah. And so jump in and talk about that for a second.
Oh, I think you do it better.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to keep going. I'm just talking a lot.
Yeah.
So nobody's thinking long term. We're thinking maybe just minutes ahead, maybe at our best.
Yeah.
And that leads to some real poor decision making for kids and adults. It also means that we're just always living pretty close to that fight or flight kind of spot of our brain or kind of place of functioning. Go ahead. You've got something you're gonna say.
No, I was just thinking about like the general nervous system. The anxiety or your stress response is constantly on flare for the kids in the room, the kid that's dysregulated, the kids that are also in the classroom that are surrounding this dysregulated kid, and the teacher. So then what we're feeding is like the mirror neurons, right? The whole classroom environment or the vibe of the classroom is just complete dysregulation, and everyone's walking on like pins and needles, waiting for their body to trigger the fight or flight response because there's going to be, they just know chaos is brewing. So that's the really unsettling part. So then we have like massive cortisol being fed to people, which causes a lot of really unhealthy side effects. And this is where we're seeing teacher burnout. And I think people ultimately exiting education. I was reading some blogs today, this morning, and just seeing people say, I left because of this, I left because of that. And I think this is a big part. They feel like it's chaotic and there's no one coming to save them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with all that. I think that it's intense. And that's when you start having people that are on a, Wednesday night are at 6:30 are already dreading Thursday morning.
Yeah.
Like they're already like dreading it. They stop coming in as much. They start being absent more. Because they're not doing well. It's not just like they're like, I don't care about this.
Or the school year where I've heard people say on Sunday nights, I'm just sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
I know I have to go back and face it on Monday, and I just don't know if I can. It's that your internal body, your nervous system, people would listen to their bodies. Their nervous system is telling them, I don't feel safe, that I'm going into a very anxiety-driven, dysregulated environment, and it feels chaotic all the time. And so your body's trying to give you some of those forewarnings.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, and we'll talk about this probably more in a different episode, I think. But the idea of when it feels this chaotic, when it feels this chaotic, it's just unsafe. If it's complete chaos, it's like it's actually unsafe. But even when it's just feeling more chaotic, which we'll get to here in a minute, I think that it's tough for the adults to feel like they can take the time to address everything and get that back on track when you also know all the things that you have to get done. And so that just contributes all the more to that feeling of like, I'm going to go. I think it contributes to a feeling of like, I have to go in tomorrow and fail again.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can do about it. And that's like an awful spot for people to be in. Again, we've talked about this before. A lot of teachers are kind of tend to have a personality where they're like, they want to do things well, which is great. But they also, a lot of them are like, tend to fall in a little bit more of the rule follower, kind of personality. And I want to do things the way I've been told to do them. And I want to make sure I'm doing this curriculum right. I want to make sure I, do the fire drill right. I want to make sure I do they just want to do all the things right. And when you feel like you're failing a lot, that's a tough place for personalities like that to be.
Yeah. And I was thinking, so we think about the stress response system, your first instinct is to go and fight or flight. But then I think we're starting to see some people at this point, they've advocated, they've talked to their building administrator, they've talked to other people. No one's coming into saving them. So what do we know next? They go into freeze and they just start disassociating and retracting from the class or the experience. And that's also a super scary spot where we're starting settling in with like some depression, some pretty chronic anxiety and those kind of things. So if you think about, our teachers are no different than our kids. And so maybe even some kids in that classroom too are feeling the same way. They feel like this is just my baseline now.
Yeah.
So some of them
this is just what this is.
This is just what it is. So some of their survival techniques are going to be to disassociate. And that's, I think Dr. Perry talks about that a lot. That's one of the most concerning things when we see kids that aren't even reacting to chaos anymore.
Yeah.
This is their baseline.
Yeah. So one of the things I talked about with that complete chaos too is like what our presence does to that. So sometimes like our knee-jerk reaction in those moments is to kind of do more. Yeah. And I think it's important to not hear me say like do nothing. Like that's a bad idea. Yeah. That's just negligence. But I think sometimes doing more and trying to do more can make things worse. But what I think we a lot of times need to try to do, and it's funny, I've talked to a handful of people about this before. It's just something that is how I think about it. I think a lot. And sometimes you just assume people think about stuff the same way you do or whatever. Yeah. And then you realize they don't because you talk to people and you're like, oh, everybody's different. But I think what I feel like I try to do in those moments is really just slow things down and like insert just like the calm presence into the situation to help everything, myself and students, calm down. But while you were talking about like the state dependent functioning and stuff like that, I started thinking like, I wonder if part of the reason, this is off script, so who knows what kind of crazy thing I'm going to say. I wonder if part of the reason why it's hard for people to slow down when it feels chaotic is because we're operating in such a low state of our brain, like that with that state dependent functioning. And so we can only think a few minutes ahead. Yeah. And that means that it feels like every decision we make has to be like wrapped up within a few minutes. Like there has to be some kind of completion to it in just a few minutes. Whereas if we're doing well and we're in a really relatively regulated spot, we can think, at least hours in advance, if not days. And so then it's all of a sudden a lot easier to slow down a chaotic feeling 10 minutes. Because we also can have the perspective of like, oh, but this is hours from now, this isn't going to be how it is. Days from now, I need to also still be able to accomplish X, Y, and Z. So how I react in these 10 minutes of maybe intensity, I need to make decisions that are good for hours from now and days from now. But I wonder if that's part of why it's so hard for people to slow it down in those moments is because they are feeling like it, if you're only looking this far in advance, everything is just a little bit in front of you. Well, then sure. And then you have the adrenaline rushing from your stress response system. So that's causing your body to, right? It's telling you it's got to do something. It's got to fight or flight. We get going because your anxiety's up there. And so that's why breathing is so incredibly important because you have to slow your stress response down. The biggest thing as an administrator when I'm coming in, the first thing I'm looking at, if we're looking at like our evaluation rubric, is the learning environment. So until you get that regulation based going where the room feels regulated, there really is nothing else you can do in that classroom. That's the first and foremost. Yeah. So this is like, I would say, talking through that's more of a emergency situation. So we're trying to move from complete chaos, right? You're coming in and you're trying to support somebody. And then we're going to talk about controlled, predictable chaos. What does that look like? Yeah, real quick before we jump to there. In those complete chaos kind of moments, like you said, I think it's good to reiterate, like we do have to make sure that if it's dangerous or potentially physically unsafe in any way, like we have to make sure that stuff is restored safety. Number one, 100%. People are safe. People are okay. No one's going to get hurt. Yeah. We have to do that. That has to be first. And we have to get there quick. But then like even once the general control is gathered, it's worthwhile to kind of let the room breathe for a few. Maybe don't gain control back. Once you gain control back, maybe don't like 1 minute later be like, and now let's all gather up so I can start this, U.S. history lecture, whatever. Your nervous system has to come down. You have to come down and you have to be able to access your prefrontal cortex. And you have to that's where the interoception for adults and kids comes into play. You have to realize when you really are at a state of regulation to be able to move on. And your kids probably need twice as long as you do. Yeah. All right.
True.
So you were saying controlled,
okay,
predictable.
controlled and predictable, because that's our next part. So how do we go into the controlled and predictable chaos?
Okay. So there's a difference between actual chaos and things just feeling chaotic, right? It can feel chaotic and not be actual chaos.
Yeah.
To me, actual chaos is like, it is dangerous. Like it's out of hand and we need to get stuff under control for safety reasons. But I also think that it can be difficult for people to differentiate between actual chaos and things just feeling really chaotic, which also isn't great. You don't want things to feel chaotic either, but there can be, I think there is a difference. So actual chaos is, again, actual chaos. We've covered that plenty. And we need to restore the safety, but things just feeling chaotic is a little bit different. We still obviously don't like it if it feels chaotic, or is even like a lower level of chaos. But what we really don't want from the chaotic feeling situations is that they're coming out of nowhere, is that we can't expect or predict when they're happening. Because when they do, people start to panic. And I think that makes it really difficult for us to act any differently than if it is actually unsafe.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense? Like we're going to still act unsafe, like things are unsafe, even if they're not, if things are feeling chaotic and they keep surprising us. So like an example I was thinking of is just, or a way to maybe better describe this is like early in a school year with new students, we might feel like the chaos is completely unpredictable. Like, I don't know when it's happening. We hear things like it just happens out of nowhere. It's something we hear that a lot. There's no reason at all to why they did this. They just did it. We hear that a lot. And those kind of things are, I get it. Those things are basically never true. What really people mean, I think, when they're saying stuff like that is that we just haven't figured out why it's happening yet, or we haven't found the pattern yet.
Yeah.
And I think that's also can be hard for people to hear. Like, don't just walk in and be like, well, that's not true. Like if you're hearing somebody say that, so you've got a colleague, you've got one of your staff members saying like, it's happening out of nowhere. There's nothing that predicts that it's happening. Don't just walk in and be like, well, that's not true. You're wrong. Like, that's not what I'm saying, but I am saying it is basically never really the case. We have to just figure out why it is happening. And sometimes that's a lot easier said than done. Sometimes it takes a long time. So I think the first step in preventing the chaos is being able to predict it way better. Or being able to avoid the chaotic feelings is like the better we're able to predict when it's happening, the less it's going to feel chaotic, because the reality is if we kind of know it might be coming, even if it's kind of unavoidable, which maybe is a weird thing to say, but like if it kind of, we were like, hey, I know this kid might have a reaction. I've done everything I can. I still think they might have a reaction to what's going to happen next. But if I know that's going to be the case, then I'm going to should be able to be way more regulated even when it does happen. And that's going to help me. That's going to help that student. It's going to help the whole rest of the class feel like it's not nearly as chaotic, because they're going to be co-regulating basically with you and playing off of how you are feeling throughout the whole thing. So we look for the patterns. We look for the reasons why. I think we have conversations with the student, right? Good Ross Green plug again. Yeah. Like this is what he would talk about. Like there's pretty much, he refers to them a lot of times of like, what are the problem solving, right? So what is the problem? And then we have to actually solve the problem with the student. We have to identify and come up with what that is with the student. And so I think having conversations with the student that delves into the why. And then, and I think this is important, for me, the first step is then we adjust. Like as the adults, we are going to adjust now. And I don't expect the student to adjust yet. And I will, but just not yet. And I think that's important, because if we put it all on the student right away, like, okay, well, now we figured out the problem. We figured out what's happening. Now you have to fix it. I'm pretty sure if they could have fixed it, and could have handled it in the first place, like they don't want to be chaotic. Like they don't want to feel like they're out of control. They would have already done it. Like they would be doing it if they could. And so I think I have to be the first one to adjust, or my team has to be the first one to adjust, or the adults have to be the first one to adjust. And now like our whole team is just adjusting. And so we've realized, for example, that maybe lunchtime is when a student keeps getting out of hand. And maybe they're basically okay before, they're basically okay after. I might do something like adjust when my lunch is, so that I can be more present with that student during lunchtime, or make sure that whoever the student feels most comfortable with is available, and we'll finagle our own lunch times around and kind of figure it out and make sure that the kid has somebody that they're safe with. Maybe I'll work with them on staying regulated and calm. I'll teach strategies, of course. I try to provide ways out of the situations if they are getting overwhelming, and I'll teach the student how to access what he needs and where to go if there's a problem, what to do once you get there.
So you're doing some coaching.
Yeah. And you kind of have to do it explicitly. And I think even as you are out there and you hear this, like, it would be easy to be like, well, they should know, especially as we start talking about older kids, like middle school, high school, like you still have to be pretty explicit and hopefully have a conversation in a way that lets the student know it's okay that you don't know this stuff yet, or that you haven't figured it out yet. That's what my whole job is. Like, huge part of my job is to help teach you things, and this is just one of the things I'm going to teach you. I'm also going to teach you math or whatever it is, but but I'm also going to be teaching you, hey, this is where you go, and this is where it's safe to be when things are getting a little dicey. So I think that's kind of where it starts. And then as the students building confidence in that, where they're showing that they can handle it, you start backing off and you start giving them more autonomy and all of that and how that works. You listen to them and you keep having conversations about like, hey, do you think we can adjust this plan? Or do you think we stick with it? Or do you think we need to do something even more? Or do you think that you're feeling pretty good now that you know you're allowed to leave this overwhelming situation, and so now we actually can back off a little bit more and I can trust you a little bit? You have to keep having the conversations throughout the whole process.
But you're doing that when you're starting to see precipitating factors that show dysregulation is going to happen. So we're not having these conversations when kids are dysregulated.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Good distinction, right? Like you're starting to see some signs, maybe it's a kid crinkling his hands or starting to pace a lot, or you get to know your kids really well. So you start seeing their triggers of like things that like, oh, this is usually a time where I can start seeing that they're starting to get amped up a little bit. So I'm going to start having this conversation now. We're not having that conversation when we've already kind of lost, when their brains are not able to access executive function, they've actually lost control, right?
Yeah. So I think the reminders and the prompting, yes, it would be like when I start noticing stuff. The talking about a plan and coming up with what it is, that's going to be like at a separate time. I know you know this, but I feel like just to clarify, yeah. Like I'm going to be coming up with a plan with a student, having a conversation with a student when I'm highly confident that they're regulated and we're in a good spot and there's nothing that's like brewing or anything like that. We're going to have a different time set aside where I might sit down with a kid and be like, hey, listen, this is it might even be after an incident that happened, right? And now we've all gotten back into a good spot. It's just did this yesterday, like with a student. We had a moment, got back into a good spot, and then after everybody was in a good spot, I went back and I explained why I did what I did. I explained why I thought the student did what they did, asked if that was right or not. I was like, is that right? Like they were having a hard time talking, about stuff. And so I threw some stuff out there. A couple things the student was like, no. And I'm like, okay. I was like, that's what I was thinking though. So that's interesting. Tell me what it was instead. And then the kid was able to tell me a little bit of what they were thinking or what they were feeling instead. It's those kind of times that when everybody's good again, that you can start figuring stuff out. And then at the end of all of it, I was able to be like, okay, so like, let's say this happens again. Like what would be a helpful plan for you? Like, what is this actually going to do when it gets dicey again? Here are options that I feel like you have. Do those work for you or do those not work for you? What do you feel like you need? Again, kind of Ross Greenish, like in how he lays stuff out. But I think those are the times where it's like regulated, it's not in the moment. The reminders then, like, hey, this is what the plan is. Hey, remember, you're allowed to come back to my room. Hey, remember, you're allowed to walk out and get a drink and you don't have to tell anybody if it's hard for you to talk. Like, just wanted to remind you. And then like back off and maybe they go get the drink. Maybe they don't, maybe they feel like they're okay. Maybe just the reminder that, hey, I'm allowed to go get the drink is enough to calm me down in that moment and then remind me that I'm okay. Or maybe I give them a reminder and it still goes south on me and we figure out, hey, that really didn't cut it, did it? Like we had a plan, but clearly that didn't work. We need to come up with another one once we're regulated again.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense, that difference in distinction there?
Yeah, and I pretty much wrote down the same things you did. I was really thinking when we started talking about controlled, predictable chaos that we're starting to have plans. We're not just living in the moment anymore. So we're starting the state-dependent functioning, start thinking about hours out instead of in minutes and seconds. And we're beginning to develop systems, like starting to think about like having some predictable systems or things to go with our plans. And then maybe even feeling a little bit more of security within the classroom, that maybe our anxiety isn't so heightened all day long. We might feel moments of heightenedness, but it's not the continuous, like I feel just sick all day because I just feel like it's constantly on eggshells. There might be moments that feel like that, but it's not your baseline of operating anymore.
Yeah. I wrote down and I laughed at myself last night when I was looking over notes. I had no other notes with this, but I think it sounds good.
Okay.
But I don't know if it really means anything. And I try to stay away from stuff like that, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think our goal in those moments is to provide exceptional order to the least ordered moments.
Yeah.
And I've got no follow-up. There's no other explanation.
That's deep.
You can just sit there and think about that.
Put on a t-shirt.
You can just sit there and think about that. All right,
That's
what's
true.
next? Where do we go next?
I guess the last kind of part of the continuum is elimination of chaos or managed chaos. What does that look like or feel like?
Yeah, and we kind of talked about the predictability of it and kind of the management of it, I think, as well. But I think if you're working with some of the, especially like the highest need students that you're going to have, when it comes to, what their behavior might be, you're probably never going to completely eliminate every chaotic moment totally. And you're probably not going to be able to predict all of them 100% of the time either. I mean, stuff surprises you and you just can't always predict everything. But I think what we can do is start intentionally teaching the systems and implementing the plans like we talked about. When we know the students who are likely to have chaotic moments, when we know who they are and when those are, we can teach them very clear plans about what they do when they start to feel that way. I mean, I really think so much comes down back to that. Like, again, who do they tell that they're feeling bad? How are they going to tell them that? Where can they go? What do they have to do to go there? Are they allowed to just get up and go there? Do they have to do something first? What are they even really capable of doing in that moment? Can they even signal to somebody that they need to go there, or is that even too much? I think it's what do they do once they are there? Do they have to let somebody know that they got there? Do they have to just sit somewhere? Are they allowed to just roam free once they're wherever they're supposed to go? Like all those kind of things are things that if you explain them and teach them, then it really cuts down on a lot of potential problems or people being surprised about how things go. And a lot of students can't just jump to this point that are the ones that you're probably having to make these kind of plans with. You know what I mean? Like the ones that can jump to this quick, they are probably doing a lot better job of handling it themselves.
You may be seeing the kids dysregulate. I think something you do sometimes is like, we're actually not leaving the room today.
Yeah,
because
sure.
I'm going to have to make that decision for you because you're not able to recognize that yourself. So then I've already seen you have lots of precipitating things coming in that are triggers, and I don't see that you're a base regulation. So I'm going to make the decision and call. But that comes with knowing your kids and having the system set up so that to happen.
And again, a specific, I mean, if you've not listened to us a lot, but like you're talking like a kind of, for me, a more behavior mental health unit kind of situation. And so you're right though. There are times that the kids don't really know or they're really amped up and then they're saying like, I want to go to class. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's a terrible idea. I think we're going to let's just be in here and it'll be all right. And we're going to figure it out. And so, you have to kind of read those situations. I just think, again, like the students have to have somebody there with them in those tough moments to doing it alongside them, being there with them to help them come up with all of this. Because I know we've said it several times already, but if they could do it themselves, they would have done it already. Yeah. And so they need help, and that's part of what we need to help them with. And that goes for a kindergartner and it goes for a senior in high school. There are times that it's just too much. Things are just too much. And you need somebody else who is there, that is steady and regulated alongside you. Even if you're not quote unquote, solving the problem with them in the end, just being with them and being present in a calm, regulated way, man, sometimes that's what people are looking for. Really, almost a lot of the time, that's what people are looking for.
Yeah. I kind of just put the same thing that at this point you're having confidence in your decision making. You feel good about decision making. You're not saying, I don't know what to do. You know what to do. You have systems in place. You've been provided training. You're looking at long-term goals and prevention, and we're looking at weeks and months ahead at this point. Yeah. And that your baseline is pretty much regulation. Even in those chaotic moments, you're not losing, your stress response isn't super triggered because you have confidence, systems, plans, support in those moments. And then I always say this is a part where we get into where we can call it family business, where nobody else probably even knows anything that's going on. It's really confidential between you and the student, or maybe you, your student and the administrator, that the building doesn't, your dysregulation from your students and you are not feeding the building.
Yeah.
It goes back to that like family business of just who needs to know.
Yeah.
So I always say that's a sign of like really controlled or managed chaos.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point too. I think there's sometimes that there's stuff that happens that people don't even realize it happens. And that's when I feel like that's when I try to remind the team and stuff like that are doing something similar to what I'm doing. Like, that's good. Now, what it can also do is make it really tough for the rest of the building. Like, 'cause then they're like, well, this person still needs to get this done, or something. And you're like, actually, they're having a really hard time. And so that's nice when you can actually explain those things to people, because then they're super understanding and they're like, well, I didn't even have any idea. And you're like, yeah, that's why that's why we're telling you to fill you in.
All right. How does this progression mindset help educators set realistic goals when managing behavior?
Well, naturally, I think what all of us want when it comes to the behavior or tough behavior that we're working with students is for it just to be over. We want it just to be over as fast as possible. We want chaos to be gone as fast as possible, understandably. But by understanding that it's okay and reasonable to have it become predictable and manageable first, I think hopefully it takes some of the pressure off. Like, you don't necessarily have to feel like week one, everything has to be exactly where it needs to be, and we just need to be firing on all cylinders and smooth sailing. If you realize, like, hey, it's going to be a little dicey for a little while. I mean, I think all teachers do this pretty well, or have some kind of understanding of this. They're like, maybe younger teachers probably have a little bit harder time. But if you've been around very long, you're like, you hear it, right? We're still relatively in the front-ish part of the school year. You still hear it. You're like, yeah, they're finally starting to get into the systems. We're starting to get there. It's always the first handful of weeks are always a lot rougher, or always a lot more tiring because of the behavior and whatever. Not necessarily like huge, giant behavior, but because it's just takes a while to get back into the rhythm of things and things like that. But I think allowing yourself to know that it's okay not to have to jump from what feels like maybe unsafe, complete chaos to everything's completely fine. It's too big of a jump. It's too overwhelming, and that's when people, I think, start shutting down and are like, well, I guess this is just what it is. I guess I'm just babysitting all day, and I guess I just manage. This is all I do this year is just manage this giant behavior and this chaos, and I hope nobody gets hurt. You start hearing things like that potentially. I also think it should help us maybe offer the students and the other staff members a little bit more grace as things are getting figured out, to know that, like, hey, all of us are trying to figure stuff out. It's going to take a little bit of time. And so when I'm looking at somebody else who's maybe got just students that aren't quite there yet, like, hey, you've got to be able to offer some grace and understanding, I think. And then I think hopefully this progression also reminds us that it's okay to have the end goal in mind. Just remember that there's like a bunch of steps that have to happen before we get there. I can't like skip the steps, and the student can't skip the steps either. Yeah. You can't skip the steps of like doing all the figuring it out, having the conversations, making the plans. Like, you can't just skip those. Because
you don't live in a continuum, then you're going to live in a loop. You're just going to keep on looping back. Yeah. So then you're going to drive yourself
crazy.
Put
that on a t-shirt. If you can't live in a continuum, then you're going to live on a loop.
Yeah, there you go. Where the marketing coming out of here is just insane today.
Yeah, all those t-shirt sales.
I brings a sense of accomplishment and goal setting, right? Like, our first goal, I usually say, is to let's structure and set up the environment. Our goal is for all the kids to stay in their seats. Our goal is for, kids to transition from location. Like, we're setting very small, obtainable goals. We're looking at when you call and response kind of things, right? Yeah. Like, you ask for the attention, you get it. Like for larger classroom management. So, I think some of those things are we're setting some of those smaller goals that are good practices for classroom management, and we're going to embed it in there. And it looks different on what type of class you're teaching and the age level and all those kind of things, but those systems are really important. And then it can't be perfect all the time, but we can work our way out of feeling crazy all the time for sure. Yeah. And there's going to be days. There's days, I think, as veteran educators, Jess and I have been doing this 20 plus years, and it doesn't always feel like most days it feels really good, but there's days where I'm like, oh, that felt a little crazy today. But then you have enough skill set to come back and reflect and kind of make plans and kind of keep it in the elimination chaos thing, because you have a toolbox. And that's the hard part when you're a younger teacher. When you're starting out, you don't have the toolbox yet to kind of say, I've done this before, I think we can make the adjustments here.
Yeah, or the experience to look back and be like, oh, I've felt this way before, and this still turned out okay.
Yeah,
Instead, you're
so
like,
true.
this is my first experience with it, or my first handful of experience, and it's overwhelming, and will it ever get better? Yeah, that's why it's important to have veteran teachers kind of surround those younger teachers and help them out.
All right. What are other factors we should be thinking about that could influence the chaos, and how do we manage those?
Okay, some quicker-ish hits here. Ready? Our role, I think, in the thing, a tough thing to think about is our part in it all. Am I making this more chaotic? These are things that are hard to ask, because it's you have to really look at yourself. Am I making things more chaotic? Sometimes I make things more chaotic. I mean, none of us are perfect. Like, sometimes you make a decision, you look back later and you're like, well, I contributed to that. Am I adding to the chaotic energy just with my responses? Am I creating the chaotic energy by my lack of structure from the get-go? By having so much structure that my students are cracking under the pressure. So just look at your role. What's your role potentially in it as well? I do that frequently to try to decide, hey, am I part of the problem here? I do that a lot because you have to. I think certainly other factors that we should be thinking about that influence potentially chaos. The home life of students, right? What's happening there? Is everywhere chaotic for her? If so, how can I provide a space that maybe is less chaotic and a place for her brain to rest? Academic excellence is obviously important, but doesn't matter to her at all if she's constantly in survival mode right now. So how can I do things that help that? I can't control home. It's outside of my ability to control, but I can recognize like that maybe that's a problem, or maybe that's contributing to the chaotic feeling, and then I can adjust. Again, it starts with me adjusting, and then generally being aware of what we can control, like I said, versus what we can't. I think I can control like where a kid sits in a classroom, but I can't control what his home life's like. I can control if they have enough to eat during the day. I can't control if they're too afraid to sleep at night, so they're exhausted during the day. Things like that. You just got to parse that out a little bit and understand what you can and can't control. And you can't get too hung up on the things you can't. Yeah. I see that sometimes. I don't want to sit on this idea too long. I see that sometimes, especially with people that, I know all teachers care, but people that are like really super maybe sympathetic, over empathetic, and really just care about the kids, get maybe just a smidge too involved, who can get like hyper focused on like the how can I help your home life. I'm not saying those are bad things to like think about, like if you can have some kind of influence, but there's just stuff you can't control. And if you get too hung up on that, I think it takes your time and energy and mental capacity away from the things you can control. It's just something to keep in mind.
We can't control that they have devices all night when they're at home, or how the parents parent or this. Yeah, we can coach, mentor, support.
Yeah, offer advice if they're looking for it, but like I can't actually control those things.
Yes, 100%. I put the same things. Teacher state of mind. Yeah, you can control taking care of yourself or not. Your belief systems about kids, your school, your culture and climate should kind of influence that, what we believe about kids. We can control systems we put in place to support kids when they're dysregulated, and we can control training that we provide people. Oh. Those are all things that can help kind of manage what level of chaos we provide people. I think the absence of systems and training really goes to just setting your staff up to live in complete chaos. Yeah. And really working on our core beliefs about kids. Yeah. If you believe they don't belong here, they're not going to belong here. So that's right. Simple as that.
Yeah. All right. What do you want people to walk away knowing?
I think think about your nervous system and the kids, how we can change the environment or systems to create sense of predictability and set boundaries that allow students and staff to feel safe. That's when we've created an environment that really is successful.
Yeah. I say, I was just talking to a different person the other day about who's kind of starting out in a behavior mental health style program in a school where one hasn't existed before. I think one of the pieces of advice that I reminded this person of is if you find yourself feeling kind of frustrated or saying things like, well, this is as good as it gets, or this is as good as it's going to get, you should probably step back and get some insight maybe from somebody else. Don't settle for a chaotic feeling being just what it is. Let that sit for a second, right? Don't settle for a chaotic feeling being just what it is. I mean, there may be those moments, but we should be seeing steady improvement over the course of the year. It doesn't mean like over the course of 1 week, we're not going to have highs and lows, but over the course of the year, we should be making improvement. And if we're not, then I think we need to change our approach, because we should never settle for the chaos.
Yeah, doesn't feel good.
All right. Well, we appreciate you guys listening. And hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully it helps you kind of hear how we think through that kind of continuum, that kind of process, and what we kind of do as an approach for some of that. It's hard and it can be a lot. Just one, hang in there. 2, ask for help. And I think 3, really just stay the course, be steady, be consistent, stay the course. Obviously make adjustments as you need. If you found this helpful at all, or if you disagreed with it so vehemently that you're like, man, somebody else has got to hear this so we can talk about how crazy they are, share it with somebody and then have a conversation about it. We would love for you to do that, and that helps keep the conversation going. Hey, let's go out there and let's do the work.
Let's go do it.